How do you tell people that all cancer, disease, chronic illness, autoimmune disorders, personality issues, schizophrenia, mental health issues, all of that have to do with trapped spirits in the body, conjured up from so many things? And it's crazy when you've been told not to play with that world because it's so demonic, right? People do play with the paranormal world, and they play with those devices that contact the other side, but little do they know they hold those types of immunological demons that are attached to spirits of the other side. And that is what the medical, holistic, energy healing world, politics, religion, science do, is they wrangle with those spirits, negotiate with those spirits, try to temper them, try to hold them back from being released. I mean, it is crazy how everything is connected. And so I knew about that world as far as the paranormal side of it with the Ouija board and all that, because I was raised around that. And I wouldn't say that like, oh, I came from a satanic worshiping cult, because that would be really taking things too far. But there are people that know how to play with the spirit world and also program people to be a certain way. And the person doesn't even know that's it. That's what was programming them until they study everything around them. They study politics, religion, science. Innately, they may be attracted to certain things that give them the things that they didn't know about, or shine a light on the blind spots. I mean, just coming to here to Ohio, there's a lot of like history here. So there's a lot of like ghosts, and there's a lot of paranormal activity. I'm not saying that California doesn't have paranormal activity, but of course it does. But when you come to a place like Ohio that has so much history, then you see like homes that look almost like the Amityville Horror, because it looks dark, it looks old, it looks, just like things that you see in the movies. I mean, it's hard to look at a house built in 1990, 2000 as something haunted, unless it was built on some kind of Indian burial ground. But when you go to like Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Midwest, any place where the 13 colonies existed, and there's so much history in that area, then there's a lot of spirits, demonic spirits of the past, that stay stuck and trapped in these specific areas. And then people who hold on to a lot of history within their body, mind, and spirit then have these things attached to them. And then that's also what sickness is. See, I don't think people make the distinctions that sickness is the body trying to release the demons, the spirits. And so what happens is when they take all their different remedies and get all their surgeries, the remedies hold back from releasing the demons. So the person metastasizes those demons, but they don't see it as that, because that's not the world they come from. So they look at it as from the science medical point of view. But people do hold on to those demons. And so the demons get attached, they become sick, and then it also becomes cancerous. And that's where people don't really understand that side of it, because cancer is like a demon that metastasizes within the body, and the body isn't equipped to release it because it hasn't been conditioned to do that, because everything's been so compartmentalized and disconnected because of deficiencies, nutritional deficiencies and or blockages. There's so many reasons why someone would not have a connected body, mind, and spirit. So then they go to the medical, holistic, energy healing world, mediums, to go and try to figure out how to manage that situation. And so to connect that, those concepts of demonology and then the medical, holistic, energy healing world, And then with the absolution of the religions, oh my gosh, yeah, when you study them separately, they're all like compartmentalized, and people play in those worlds and play with their scripture, or they play with their medical journals, or they play with their politics around it. But when you finally hybridize everything and you realize they're all connected, then you realize, yeah, the hospital system is like the Catholic Church that knows that they develop demons in people through so many different ways, and then they have to go and cut out the demons, surgically do things with the demons. I mean, it's crazy how connected everything is. And so when I'm watching these ghost shows, when I came here to Ohio, my husband, he introduced to me like Zach Bagans' Ghost Adventures. And that's basically an introduction to the spirit side of the realm of cancer, disease, and chronic illness, and fertility. That's also the whole fertility world, is how do you develop amazing demons, right, that are productive, peaceful, happy, content, and then how do you develop serial killers and bullies and intolerant people? Well, there's the terror, there's all of the negative entities and energies that people invoke on each other through conjuring up demons of the past. And there's all that, yeah, the mysticism that people practice. And then you know about Hollywood and all the players in Hollywood and the people in the fashion industry playing with spirits and conjuring up ancient spirits that do haunt really old places that are trapped, like in the Conjuring house that you know, those movies that you've seen. And just watching some of these YouTube videos of mediums that are strong enough to go into these areas that are highly toxic, full of ancient spirits that find a way to break the barrier between the dead and the living, and they, you know, move objects, and they put imprints and handprints, and even break skin, causing blood. And those are really malevolent. And so the fact that I know that there's truth to that side of the world is what made me not want to treat my disease the last 5 years, because that's exactly what I was dealing with, was releasing all those demons that I gained from Vietnam, ancestral demons, plus whatever in California, and then my exposure to so much diversity out there in the world, and then of course taking all the remedies that compound it. And so it was just like a whole matrix of demons that I had to release, and it came out in sickness: back pain, arm pain, leg pain, constipation, diarrhea, headaches, hives, feeling like I'm gonna fucking scream, you know, anxiety, high blood pressure, all the different infections. I mean, this is the thing with people, is they hold on to so many demons, and it comes out in those pain and suffering. I mean, the fact that when I had those birth control implants, okay, for like 6 years, and I finally got them, you know, taken out like in the early 90s, and then having to deal with the arm pain, like my arm was gonna freaking fall off from the immunity wearing off the last year when Hurricane Helene came through. That was, you know, probably the second most painful situation besides July 2022, when everything kind of changed again, and I felt like I couldn't even barely walk. I felt like I was dying. And, you know, I was, my colon was so full of fucking Tootsie Rolls that I had to really like blow my nose and drink, well, water couldn't even penetrate the mycoplasma, but I really had to work everything out down there, and food was so necessary. So this last year after Hurricane Helene, holy shit, the arm pain was like unbelievable. And that's a lot of trauma and demons and entities that are stuck in the injured places of your body. And so that's the thing about all the different pains that people have. It's the demons that are trapped in the body, trying to get, the body's trying to release. They don't want to go. But so you have this resistance of the good trying to release the evil, and then people work against themselves. They're always trying to do some kind of remedy or shortcut. But I'm telling you, the way I did it, knowing that I could handle the heart palpitations and the headaches and the migraines and the hives and the fatigues and the hunger, was that I had to feed the entities. I had to feed and then release. And sometimes you have to be strategic about releasing without using enemas, without using jelly juice. Even milk isn't always fun because then people get the acid reflux sometimes. And so it's like knowing that you're going to have to find a way to eat food and feel so uncomfortable and find a way to strategically release the demons that are down there. And then that's the hell, that's the stinky, stenchy, sulfur smelling hell is all in your gut that has to be released. And that's the thing about the pain and suffering. It's the pressure. Because every single time that my body had to go through an immunological conversion, because the body was converting the food into vital organs, into flesh, into also carrying the waste out, and this wasn't healed yet, oh my God, I'd wake up and my left arm would be so sore. And that's why I'd be waking up at 1 or 2 in the morning and not be able to sleep. Because that was a time when everything was going through its conversion process. And that's the time when people die too, because it died suddenly, especially in the morning, is when the body goes through its processes and it's not able to carry them out. And then people die suddenly because they don't have enough substance or enough flexibilities to release. Okay. And so this last year, it was like waking up at 1 or 2 in the morning. And I'd feel the pressure in my arm, my peers hurt so much. And so I'd have to find a way to leverage everything down there. And you figure out, how I've done it. I've told you guys, a million times, but I'm not going to keep going through it. But at this point, not everybody's able to do that. So, but I was able to blow my nose. Of course, all the mucus and stuff leverages everything down there and you keep blowing. And so that was a whole year of another, healing process. And so now when I go into the public, when I hang out with my husband, we do whatever we do, then I might sneeze a few times. Blow my nose. I don't poop all the time every day. Some days I do, just depends on, the atmosphere and where I am immunologically, during that time. And so the sneezes is the body breaking the immunity and like doing little explosions in the body, so it's able to push whatever stuff to its prospective places. And then either I'm rebuilding or I'm releasing. Okay. And that's the thing, and even losing hair, you lose hair, you're losing entities in the body. And that's another thing too, is that when people have so much hair, yeah, they're full of spirits. When you think about when you take like bunches of your hair and just, separate them all out, that's like a little child or an entity in your body. Here's one child, another child. When you have so much hair, right, you have a lot of children in the body. And so when you start losing your hair during these energy conversions, you're losing spirits. You're losing things that were taking over, that were hybridized with you, that were working against you. And then you have to keep feeding, eating, and people don't. They're afraid of food because it's painful. Because you have to feed to release and feed to retain. But that concept is lost on people. So then they starve themselves. And then that malevolent spirit that's causing pain and suffering becomes the person. And they end up not wanting to eat because then the body would try to release that malevolent entity. And that's when the war between good and evil happens. And when you allow yourself to get so skinny, to build up pressure to release the demon is almost impossible. It's too painful. So people stay stuck with having to entertain a literal demon in the body that they can't get rid of. Because if they were to try to get rid of it, it would be so painful. Because again, eating to build up pressure so you have substance and reserves to release is too much. And that's why when people get so skinny, I'm just like, dude, it's pretty much over. They just got to now deal with the rest of whatever the body is able to deal with, that entity taking over. And so that's why I have a belly. That's why I have boobs. And they're bigger now, yes, because they have to be. When I'm around so many different diverse entities, I have to be able to convert that information to my benefit and release the demons. And yes, I need food and air and water and rest and release. And my hair, I have a few gray hairs, but nothing crazy. But when people start becoming so white and so gray, yeah, their body's under stress. You hear about that. You saw something on the Facebook memes that It's not that you're getting old and dying. It's that your body's under stress when your hair turns white. But you can't tell people anything because they think that any kind of pain and suffering, they're going to fucking die. Which, yeah, could happen. I'm not saying it's not, because I don't know where you are as far as immunologically, so I can never assume that you could survive pain and suffering. But yeah, the demon world is all about cancer, disease, chronic illness, autoimmune disorders, all of the activism and all of the hatred and the racism and all the isms is about demons taking people over. Everything when it comes to being in fear of air, food, and water, and all the different modalities in the therapies, especially the VACCINESs, I don't blame you for being afraid of those specific, immunological therapies, because there are spirits in those too. And if you can't handle the life you have in your body, what makes you think you can handle taking on more life? Because when you take on something like a immunological therapy, it is conjuring up antibodies, developing antibodies. It's like birthing new life. And so what the Epidemiological Society hasn't figured out is, yes, that was probably okay maybe 30 or 40 years ago, but over time, as we are entering into a more aggressive change in our atmosphere, people can't handle taking on more life. They can barely handle the life they have in their body. So to take on more antibiotic life, why do you call it antibiotic? Because it's antibodies develop based upon an exposure to antigen. And then you have to know how to assimilate that. And if you haven't assimilated to the last 20 years of life because you're taking all your remedies and doing your surgeries, what makes you think that the next round of protection is literally going to help a person? No, it's going to compound the issue. But if you can't acknowledge that the atmosphere has changed, causing an acceleration in the growth rate, then you'll assume that what was appropriate 20, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago is appropriate. You can't make those assumptions. But if you don't understand that there's more than just, doing a one-size-fits-all, you have to factor in climate change, the heat, the state of the immune system of the person. There's just everything. But people who are trained in one way of doing things don't take into account everything. They know about climate change, but they don't see it as a major factor in causing more problems when people are not prepared to deal with another life form, which is another antibody from exposure to antigen. Okay, and so protection can mean a whole bunch of things. It can mean developing another entity that could be extracted to a petri dish and put into a database. Be like, hey, we got another, tool of technology of the future, but hey, screw the subject here, because they're going to die anyways, but we got at least something that was born from that, which is basically their DNA. So, yeah, and that's the same thing with parents, nature and nurture. The grandparents imprint on the grandchildren through their child, their daughters, their sons. And so that's why I pointed out yesterday that it's not always the parent's fault of how the kid comes out, because remember, the parent was raised by the grandparent. And then the child or the daughter or the son, the offspring, take on those epigenetic characteristics and then passes on those epigenetic characteristics to their offspring. So the grandchildren are what the grandma intended or inadvertently altered onto their daughter or son. But before, a couple of years ago, I would say, oh, it skipped a generation. No, it's just how mediums, it's like I said, the ROGAM shot is not for the current pregnancy, it's for the future children. ROGAM shot's like grandma imprinting on the uterus. So then the next child will be subject to that epigenetic alteration. And that's science, that's fertility, that's demonology, that's cancer, disease, chronic illness, that's everything you could possibly think of when it comes to what's going on right now. And why you're seeing a lot of Democrats go off their fucking rocker because they have been experimented on such a level that they can't handle change. And you're seeing that. And that's why, you know, the Republicans are like, holy shit. That's why they were laying around the background waiting for their time, because they knew once Donald Trump got into office and had to lay down the law about a lot of things, they knew the demons would come out of people. You saw my demons come out the last 9 years. And so you gotta understand that, you know, if you want to break the generational curses, you gotta face your demons. If you can't do it because it's too painful or might be deadly, and only you and your doctors and all your people around you know, that's how it's gonna work. You know, you face your demons, and if you can't, you're gonna have to treat them until you can't handle the treatments anymore. And that's essentially the fork in the road. And only you know if you can handle those demons. And so demonology is what we're dealing with right now. Demonology is the medical, holistic, energy healing world, and fertility. And then what grandparents imprint on their children that then translate into the grandchildren. And I don't know who is going to break the curse. It could be the grandma that breaks the curse because she finally realizes her demons and faces them and feeds, and then the daughter and the grandchildren don't, because they don't have what it takes. So then the grandma is the one that survives, and the grandchildren and the daughter and son don't survive, and that's how it could go. Or it's the daughter that survives, but the child and the grandparent doesn't survive. You know, and it just depends on who's the strongest prototype. And it is a race to the bottom until you can step away from the war. So, yeah, I did this Facebook Live because I wanted to bring it all together. But I came here for a reason, to Ohio. My husband introduced me to Zach Bagans' Ghost Adventures, and I was hooked ever since. Because I knew in the back of my mind that's exactly what I was dealing with. I was dealing with demons. All right, bye.